Hey, everybody. Um, yeah, it's good to see you. What a lovely morning we've had so far. The title of the series is, let me look it up. Is it on here? We are all here. Yes, we are all here. Some of us are here because of the snow, I suppose. What a intriguing and I think powerful phrase. We are all here. It's been said by many people that something of our consciousness as human beings, as earth dwellers, as Homo sapiens, when we first started to see glimpses of the earth from space. Not only did it humble us, or some of us at least, unless you believe it was just a conspiracy in the desert in Area 51, but it was a kind of humiliation in a way on a deep existential level. Now it was thrilling, but also humiliating in the best sense of the word. We are all here, and there's nowhere else for us to go. And Abraham Heschel, I don't know if you know who that is. I'm sure many of you do. Jewish philosopher, marched with Martin Luther King Jr. He said he has an article called about space travel being immoral. But you don't hear a lot of that talk these days. But we are all here, not somewhere else. And as long as the earth, as long as something of what he would call our moral and ethical responsibility is needed here, let's not spend billions of dollars trying to get out of here. Anyway, not my opinion. You can take it up with Mr. Heschel. So yeah, that's the theme. And the question is, what is here? What is here? And that leads us almost directly, a beeline straight toward a conversation about diversity. Because whatever we mean by here, we mean it to be a wildly complex and diverse world. Not only just culturally speaking, but absolutely everything in the universe is wildly, frighteningly diverse. Yet somehow is like a bouquet here that is part of a whole. What did she say? What did she call that? Floral diversity. Sounds like one of those made-up majors that, like, what'd you major in floral diversity? And people are like, oh yeah, I thought so. And the reason why I wanted to start with this William Stafford poem is because of the line in here, the world speaks everything to us. What an incredible line. The world speaks everything to us. The question is, what the hell is it saying? What is it saying to us? The earth is communicating to us. And everything in the earth, and all the elements of the earth, the world speaks everything to us. So what is it saying? That means we bear some responsibility when it comes to listening to what the earth is saying. Through our limited capacities as human beings, through our five senses and maybe some additional ones. We have some responsibility to listen to what nature is saying, what the earth is saying, what science is saying. In other words, what is real? What is real and what is it saying to us? What's being communicated? We bear some responsibility in learning this language. And actually, it's kind of like learning a new language. And maybe with all of our advances in science and technology, the responsibility only increases because we know more. That doesn't necessarily translate to wisdom, as we can obviously tell by looking at our culture and the world, but it is like learning a new language, and that's hard. I don't know if you've ever learned a new language. I tried to learn Hebrew when I moved to Israel. One time I ordered, the words are very close in Hebrew, but I was trying to order apple juice, but instead I ordered potato juice. Kind of looked at me. It's very hard. It's humbling. It's humiliating. And I'm saying we live in that age, in the 21st century. Even though we walk around like arrogant punks, if we're really to learn the language of what the world is speaking to us, it requires us to sort of swallow hard and become better listeners. By the way, this popped in my head this morning, so I'm just adding it. You know when people say, and I've said this, I may have even said it standing up here, it is what it is. What that means sometimes is I don't really want to know, so I'm going to use this phrase, it is what it is. I don't want to look too hard. And because whatever it is actually kind of complex, difficult, multifaceted, layered, hard to understand, and I might not know what I'm talking about. It is what it is. You know? So how do we move closer to whatever it is? What is it saying to us? What is the world? What are culture? What is the earth? What is the universe? What are subatomic particles saying to us? What are they saying in the way that they're saying it in the language that we're speaking? I don't know, but I feel like looking. So today I have my talk has kind of two sections. I want to talk a little bit about nature, evolution, but more from a philosophical point of view. And then I want to talk about social science. And I'm going to try to weave these things into some things I heard in last week's talk. One of the interesting things we're trying this month, as we're talking about diversity, is that we want to have a couple of diverse speakers. And I am speaking sort of in the middle, and at least beginning this talk by trying to listen to what was said last week. In other words, am I also an open person in this system, taking in a give and take, a kind of relationship, a kind of learning relationship? And last week I thought was really profound. If you didn't see it, you should go on Facebook for no other reason, only to look at C3 things, or my posts, and listen to the talk. I mean, it was itself an expression of diversity in that we had two people, one tall and one short. That's like an inside joke that you can get too if you watch it on Facebook. It was an expression of the very thing that we value, we say we value, and we're demonstrating in a sort of a live way. So I'm trying to have a conversation with some things that came up last week. So let's start. I want to start by making some observations about the way the structure of the universe and reality seems to be situated. So maybe you've heard that whole old story where the king comes to a wise person and says, what is the earth resting on? What's the earth resting on? And the wise person says, it's resting on a lion. And the king thinks to himself, okay, well, what's the lion resting on? And the wise person says, oh, it's resting on an elephant. Okay, so then the king says, all right, then what is the elephant resting on? And the wise person says, it's resting on a turtle. And the king takes another breath and is about to ask, he's like, hold on, let me stop you. It's turtles all the way down. It's a funny story, it's an odd story. I don't even actually know what it's about, although I think I know what it's about, that whatever we mean by reality is resting on something else. All the way down and all the way up, like that Ken Wilber quote, which I'll get to in a moment. What is this world like and how is it connected? So let me give you some Ken Wilber quotes. There is no whole, W-H-O-L-E, there's no whole that isn't also simultaneously part of some other whole. Which is another way of saying there's no such thing as reductionistic science. So there's no whole that isn't simultaneously part of some other whole. Indefinitely and unendingly. That's his claim. There's no end to that. Let me give you another one. Reality, this is I think the one we read this morning already. Reality is composed neither of things nor processes. So yes, it is. It's composed of things. No. Reality is composed neither of things nor processes, neither wholes nor parts, but whole parts. All the way up and all the way down. It's turtles all the way down and elephants and lions and turtles all the way up. Everything is a whole part. How do we know that? Just think about the structure of reality. Atoms are simultaneously part of molecules. Correct? Molecules are simultaneously and holistically part of cells. It's not cells individually, they're only cells in part of an organism. Are you tracking with me? Now, we think to ourselves, we used to think in early 19th century science that had an end. It turns out, even on the subatomic level, that doesn't appear to have an end. That's what's so freaky. What Einstein called spooky. Peering into that well is spooky. Everything is a whole part. So, just a quick side note, what does that mean about diversity? How can we get more diverse? You can't. You already are. Everything is already part and whole together. What Wilbur, actually he didn't come up with the term, but what he's popularizing, he calls holons. Everything is a holon. Everything, 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 everything. And we even know that now on the level of particles. It's very hard to know even where you begin and end on the level of a particle, which messes with us. So when it comes to diversity, this is just an observation. Diversity is about accepting the reality of what already is, not creating a new reality. It's not. How can we get more diverse? It's more like, how can we accept what's already the case? You and I, on the cultural level, this works on the scientific level, but on the cultural level, are absolutely, unendingly bound up in everything else and everyone else. And I know that's a philosophical concept, which is why people don't like to embrace it, because they can just dismiss it and say, I feel like watching TV instead. So it's a big ask for any of us to move toward the reality that Wilbur is claiming is just the way it is. Which reminds me of something that was said last week. I think it was Markeith who said that diversity and inclusion really are two different things. Let's distinguish them a little bit. And he used this example. He said, let's say we have a table of 12 people and we add the 13th. We can call that diversity. We just added someone. We acknowledged that they're at the table. He was saying, on the level of inclusion means you can actually eat with everyone else, which is, I think, an interesting metaphor and kind of a challenging metaphor, but it's very much like what I'm describing here, that everything is a whole part. It's actually not a divided up universe, even though there are stratas and layers and social systems in place that create false realities that keep people disenfranchised. I'm not saying that's not real. That is real. But it's not real on the deep structure of reality. Reality is about inclusion. It's only inclusion. It's only whole parts and part wholes. There's not another universe. We don't get another one. We are here stuck with this one. Am I making some sense? Again, philosophical argument. If you've ever had a philosophy class, you know you don't tend to change your mind all that much just by hearing your philosophy professor go on and on. Or you get really fired up about one position, this was me, and then like the next week we're on to the existentialists, and then I'm really into them, you know? I just changed my mind in 1 week based on reading assignments. Now, one other phrase that I've used several times here, again from Wilbur, is transcend and include. So what is also true about holons is that they're transcending and including. The molecule transcends and includes the atom. The organism transcends and includes the cells and the molecules, and you get the basic image. It's not about, and that means evolution itself is not about just off into space above and beyond transcending everything. It has to include what's before, otherwise the whole structure of reality falls apart. Which makes talking about the nature of our social systems complex, because we want to just transcend, especially if you're a nice progressive like me. You say, definitely, I'm not including those punks that I don't want anything to do with. Correct? Meanwhile, I'll sound like inclusive while I'm saying it. So transcend and include is it's a social challenge, but it is the way reality works. It means no human being is an island. Simply not the case. Okay. Now, point number 2 on science. This is more, actually I'm not sure if this might be social science, but it doesn't matter. How many are familiar with systems theory? Or how many have heard the phrase? Oh, yeah, that's I don't really know that much about it. From Joanna Macy a little bit and from Margaret Wheatley. One of the claims is, and seems to be the case, that healthy systems are open systems. Open to what? Information. We know that on the subatomic level, molecular level, the biosphere. In order to be a healthy system, it has to remain open to information constantly. The definition of an unhealthy system is a closed system. It starts to, and unhealthy cells can work like this, they start to close themselves off to information, really, and they get sick, and they fall apart, and they die. That's all I want to say about systems theory. But that's a very interesting claim. So even if you put that into a social context, an open system is a healthy system. It can feel like the opposite, because if I open myself up to the other, I might have to change, correct? I might be threatened. So there's something, even in our evolutionary sort of DNA, which I'll talk about in a minute, that at least at times makes us resistant to health. We don't want to be healthy. We would never say that. We think we'll remain healthy by keeping the system closed. We call that the education system in America. Or fill in the blank, just about any other system. So if a healthy system is an open system and must remain open to information, we can already see how this acceptance of reality, holons, everything is a whole part, how it grows. It grows by remaining open. And I don't just mean it in the sense of, hey, I'm just open to all ideas, man. Just whatever you throw my way. I mean it more in the transcend and include. What's included? What's transcended? How are we connected? These are hard things, what I'm just describing. So, yeah, a healthy system is an open system. That's true on the subatomic level and also on the level of civilizations, is my guess. When they clamp down, they die. This happened to the Roman Empire. It tried to white knuckle it at the end, and it collapsed. So I wonder what other civilizations might try to white knuckle and remain at the top, only to collapse. I don't know. I'm not arguing for that. I'm not even arguing. I'm just talking up here. Okay. Now, a couple things about evolution in the general sense. It's not so pretty. I mean, a lot of people have a kind of a naive notion, and this is maybe a longer talk for another time, but the naive notion is everything always gets better. That's not always the case. There's also collapse. There's destruction. There's the same systems that grow, transcend, and include in holons, transcend and include, or descend and come apart in the same holonic way that they build up. Another sermon for another time, if that's even a sermon. So evolution is not so pretty. And that reminds me of something that Michael said last week, which was an offhand comment, and he said it very quickly, and it really disturbed me, and it should disturb all of us. And if it doesn't, I'm going to try to disturb you right now with it. He said something very interesting. He said, according to research, and there is such a thing as research, 5 and 10-year-olds prefer people of their own kind. I thought they were just innocent cherubs. I thought if we just protected that. And they had no layers of what we would call what is the nature nurture kind of thing. If we could just eliminate that and give them a nice pure education, they just walk around as little cherubs, embracing all manner of diversity. The science doesn't back this up. It doesn't seem to work in the human brain, which we're like, crap, which tells you something. You cannot educate your way out of all this stuff. I one time got into this huge argument, and I'm not going to have it right now, so don't come up to me afterwards and say, let's pick up the argument, but we was talking about guns, and I have a very anti-gun friend, and he was saying, it's taught. A boy who picks up even a pretend gun is taught that. If we could educate them differently, if you don't have guns in the home, they will not pick up little sticks and point them at people and shoot them. And I'm saying this is 100% false. Just have kids. So, what is that? What is that? And how do we make sense of it? And in terms of transcend and include, how is that an invitation to include but also transcend? Because what we want to do is eliminate it, but it can't be eliminated. That's what the science seems to say. If 5 and 10-year-olds innately prefer people of their own kind, and it's the same, by the way, with small infants. So the science also backs this up. We cannot educate our way out of this. So bias is built in. And it's part of, a kind of map that I keep referring to, egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, can be part of one's psychospiritual development. But we can't deny it, which is what we have going on in a lot of circles. Suppress and deny. And Michael actually said that. He said that last week. He said, we try to suppress it, which means it's going to leak out sideways. That's what happens when you suppress things. It's going to come out in other ways, and sometimes in very dark ways. So, I think in one level, what I'm saying is that we must accept the fact that we evolved to prefer our own kind at a certain psychological stage. It doesn't mean you have to stay at that certain psycho-spiritual stage. It doesn't. But it's very easy to get stuck there. Why? Because ethnocentric boundaries protect you. There is a reason why we evolved that way, and that's self-protection and the protection of the tribe. Because imagine if your kid, you're out there, we're going back and I don't even like when people do this, but I'm about to do it. We're going back into tribal times. We're wandering in the savannah, and our kid our 5-year-old has no frame of reference for who's safe and who's unsafe because he's so diverse and inclusive. And he doesn't prefer one kind over another, and he goes wandering over to the neighbor's tribe who kills him. We would say, not a good idea, correct? It's built into our DNA. It's built into our evolutionary development. So we have to acknowledge that it's there instead of deny it. Now, what's really dark, and this is about as dark as you can get, is that this very same argument is used by white supremacists to say this is the way it is. And you know what? They're right for 5 to 10-year-olds. They're right. And they use this argument, go to any playground and you'll see the kids dividing up. Therefore, this is the way it is. It is what it is. But only at a certain stage. Do you hear what I'm saying? So we have to say, yep, you're right. You're right. That's true. But what does growth look like? What does growth look like? Does it have to remain that way? And how might the cultural environment influence that child to grow up to accept more of reality, which is more whole parts and less division? With me? Just say yes. It makes me feel okay. All right. Oh, man. This is keeping it old school in here. A little amening already. Which is a pure Hebrew word, by the way. And it just means, may it be so. So yeah, I agree, may it be so. All right, so let's talk about an article that came out in the New Yorker last year called Why Facts Don't Change Our Minds. Did you see this? Why facts don't change our minds. And I started reading this article and I thought to myself, well, that only applies to other people, not me. So they did a bunch of studies, and you'd have to read the article. It's really easy to find online, but I'll just give you a few of them. The funny one I thought was they took groups of people at Stanford and they asked them what their views were on capital punishment. And some were opposed and some were for, and they gave them some information about it, some statistics. And the statistics confirmed their bias, or their opinion, we would say. And then they were told that the statistics were false. And you know what they did? Their view went up in belief, not down. Now you think it'd be the opposite. Oh, these are wrong. This is not true. I'm going to change my mind. It increased their feelings about their position. Now that's only because that's what happens at Stanford, right? None of us would do that. They call this, of course, confirmation bias. Which, want to know another word for confirmation bias? Facebook. They have figured out, with algorithms, to confirm your bias. That's why we like it so much. And sometimes confirming your bias can also be things that you disagree with. It can work both ways. I disagree with that, it confirms my bias. I agree with that, it confirms my bias. Now, if you want America to not change moving forward, let's create a social network that's addictive, that they look at all the time, that confirms their bias. We did it. It's called Facebook. And I just think this is true. Okay. By the way, you might ask yourself, what is the evolutionary advantage of confirmation bias? Because it sounds like that's not an advantage. Why would I confirm my biases? I would want just the facts so I could change my opinion and grow and be shaped. It doesn't work that way because we grew up as hypersocial creatures. And hypersociability requires some measure of conformity. So there's a funny phrase for it. They call it the my side bias. In other words, it kept us from getting screwed in the social system. I'll give you an example. Let's say I was a king and I believed that the cave on my hill had a dragon in it. But then one of my people went and wandered in there and found there's no dragon in there. Now, you would think if he came out and said there's no dragon in there, we'd all say, oh my goodness, we've been wrong. Actually, we'd probably scapegoat that person and say, get out of here, because if that information works its way into the system, the entire social network collapses. Meaning we had a whole religion around worshiping the dragon in the cave. And we have all these boundaries and rules. You can only get this close to the cave if you're wearing white, but if you're wearing pink, you can get this close to the cave. And the whole thing that makes sense of our society, religion, spirituality, science, the whole thing gets poked at and breaks down. Have I made sense? I made up that whole experiment just like in my head just now, and it's not really making sense. Is there a dragon in the cave? You know, what is he talking about? I don't know. I just made it up. But you get the point. That it's part of our adaptation for the group to hold together to believe things that are false. So it's very hard to admit you have a bias. It's very hard. All right. Here's another one from the same article. They have a section in this article that they say, incomplete knowledge empowers us. And they have some funny examples of how this works. So they did a survey, and in this survey they asked people if they knew how a toilet works. Most people said, I know how a toilet works. Then they said, okay, explain in detail. And very few people could do it. Very few people could explain. And as you, don't think about it too much because you're going to miss everything else I say, because you'll be like, can I do that? It was something like 10% of the people could explain, and no one could explain really how it works in extreme detail. The reason why this is empowering is because if everybody had to learn everything in society, we'd never get anywhere. So knowledge builds up, and we assume somebody knows how the toilet works. And therefore, I'm going to use that to empower my life to go and do the things that I want to do. Otherwise, I have to spend all my time figuring out how my individual toilet works. It's kind of wasteful. So, from an evolutionary biology point of view, wasteful. I get it. From a biological, evolutionary point of view, it's advantageous to pretend you know something that you really know nothing about. Another word for that? Facebook. Man, I really pick on Facebook like every week. It's only because I have a problem, you know. Okay, there were a couple of other examples. I thought this one was interesting too. Same, they're still exploring this incomplete knowledge and power. So this was back when Russia had invaded the Ukraine. Remember this? And they asked people if they supported military intervention. And there was a direct correlation to the number of people who supported military intervention and their lack of knowledge about where the Ukraine was. And the median distance that they were off was 1,800 miles when they were asked to find it on a map. So the less, in other words, here's the direct connection, the less they knew about the Ukraine, the more they supported military intervention. Incomplete knowledge empowers. That doesn't, that makes the world kind of scary. So take any politician, I'm not naming any, the less they know about something, the more they might sound empowered to do something about it. Basically, we live in a culture where strong feelings we think equates to understanding, but it doesn't. Strong feelings might actually be an indication that you really don't know what you're talking about. I'll give you a controversial local example. I remember when the world was up in arms about Betsy DeVos becoming the education secretary. And I remember seeing these protests, and they were yelling the word shame, which I thought was like interesting anyway, because if you were to stop and ask them, hey, is shame a good educational philosophy in the classroom? No. Then why are you yelling shame in public? It seems like an odd kind of thing. But I wondered to myself, if you were to stop this protest and say, individually, who was the last education secretary? Okay, no, I know. Some of you know. But think about that for a moment, especially in a culture of let's grab the picket sign. Can you name the last one? What were their policies? What changed over the course of 8 years? Are you happy with it? Do you know anything about it? Then all of a sudden you're, okay, confirming this notion that incomplete knowledge empowers. Almost the less I know about something, or the less I know about someone, the more empowered I feel in my strong feelings. There's a scientific basis for this. It's evolutionary. It's evolutionarily advantageous. So we have to include that. We have to say, this is the way the human brain works. It doesn't mean we have to operate like that all the time. And actually, Michael and Markeith gave us a whole list of possibilities for proceeding, and I'll give them to you in a moment. Actually, right now. One of you asked, what should we do then? Which is always a great question. First of all, he said relax. Around issues of diversity, which are very complex. We live essentially in a social system that's class. It's more of it's a class system, and there's racial overtones to that. But he said, first of all, relax. And at first I thought, that's dumb, Not that I would say that to him to his face, but I thought, no, we need to get fired up here, But he said, relax. Part of the reason I wonder, is because strong feelings don't necessarily equate to knowing anything. So relax for a moment and recognize, now I'm filling this part in, that I too probably have some confirmation bias going on. I have incomplete knowledge. I might not know what the hell I'm talking about. That's a much better way to start a conversation. Which was Markeith's suggestion, is don't come to us with solutions. Ask a few freaking questions. Which means, hey, what's it like to be you? So relax. The world is complex. It's a holonic universe. So we have every reason to mistrust even what we think is the truth. I might be wrong. I'm not as wrong as some other people, but no, I might be wrong. I might be wrong here. So relax. And he said it's also a call to return to empirical evidence, which requires a lot of humility because some of it is not going to confirm our biases. That's the problem with empirical evidence. There are going to be times when we say, oh, we were right, and there are going to be times we say, oh, we were wrong. We didn't know what we were talking about, but we thought we did, and we created a whole Facebook group around it, and it turns out I was mistaken. So he said, relax, return to empirical evidence. He said, trust your curiosity. See, curiosity, especially communal curiosity, and I think about C3 as a place like this. This is why you should become a member here. Become a member here because there are a lot of people who are deeply curious about a lot of things, and that's very contagious. And curiosity takes you into unknown territory. What can we do about it? What can we do about this thing? What do you know about it? And he said it was going to require some humility. Yep. Usually I think about the other side of whatever issue that they need humility, which is just a giant mirror at that point. So we have to proceed that way too. That doesn't mean we can't have opinions about things. We can't have ideas. We can't voice what it is that we're thinking. But I think the challenge is going to be if we're going to if the system is going to remain open and therefore healthy, we're going to have to proceed with some humility. So I thought about Roosevelt's famous quotation, do what you can with what you have where you are. Do what you can with what you have where you are. It means looking around and saying, what are the limits? I want to talk about limits next week, but what are the limits? What are the opportunities? Who else needs to be included in the system so it can remain healthy, so that the information can flow and change the system? But in the sense of do what you can with what you have where you are. So, where are you? Is the question. Thanks.